in this Liverpool game v Man United, it's either Liverpool win it, and they're in the title race, or it's Man United win it and they're clear. Oh, it was a fucking draw. What do we learn from this? Hello and welcome back to Just Another Football Podcast with me and Harry, my co-host. And I watched the Man United v Liverpool game and I thought, I don't know what I've learned from that. I think, I think going into the game, Man United would have taken a point. At the end of the game, Liverpool would have taken the point. So, it ebbs and flows. And Man City loved it. What were your thoughts on the game, Harry?
Yeah, wow. It was a very interesting game, the way it panned out. And I think you're right to look at it as... It was one of those where once it kind of got to that 65, 70 minutes, it became a case of you can't lose the game. At that point, a loss will crush you. It's different if, you go there and you're 2-0 down going into the 70th minute and you end up getting beat. The sort of psychology of it, if you sort of run it close and then you lose late on, especially for Man United, if you then lose the game having done the hard yards like that, it's almost more of a crushing blow. It's a difficult one to assess because...
Well, if we go through the game, I think, looking at the starting 11s, Henderson at the back gave me worries if I was a Liverpool fan. And not playing a traditional centre-back, Fabinho's been really good there. But not playing like just a guy that plays centre-back for his entire career was a worry. But then I look at Alisson and I thought the way that they managed the gap between Alisson and the line of the defence was perfect.
Yeah. They still were able, with two centre midfielders, they showed it on Monday Night Football last night, the average position of every player on the pitch. And still with two centre mids playing at centre back, they were able to play that sort of high line with the average position, with the full-backs obviously in the opposition's half, and then the two centre backs sort of on the D of the halfway line. And as you say, it's made easier by the fact that Alisson's really good at sweeping up behind. So anything that gets played in, he's quite good at sort of like tidying up. He's good with his feet. He's good off his line. And you're right to mention the centre mids playing at centre back. It's obviously a concern. You don't have specialists there. I think it hurts them in terms of progressing the ball back to front. I think with Van Dijk in there especially, his passing is really good, especially into the forwards, and it just helps them transition quicker and catch teams ultimately. The other thing worth mentioning is if everyone's fit and the two centre backs play, those two play in midfield.
Yeah.
So when you assess their midfield, I remember Gary Neville saying it on the commentary, and I sort of agreed with it. It was pretty lightweight.
If you look at it, who was it? It was Thiago, Shaqiri, and Wijnaldum. And I look at them three and just go, that's not the same as Thiago further up, Fabinho sitting, and then Henderson as a ball rotator.
And I think there's a common kind of misconception in football that if you have more attacking players on the pitch, like that lineup on paper, that he was forced to play it. Really, I know, he could have changed the odd centre midfielder. He could have played Curtis Jones in there, for example. But by and large, it's a pretty attacking midfield, and you just assume you're going to create more because you've got more players with kind of more attacking-minded players. The problem is, if you have Fabinho, and I say the problem, the counter to that is if you have Fabinho and Henderson in there, you're going to sustain attacks more because they're going to win you the ball back quicker. They are in the positions to make the interceptions, make the tackles, and also you're going to play with more confidence in terms of what's behind you as an attacking unit, not be scared of giving the ball away, making slap passes, taking risks, because Man United are a really good team in transition. They've got dangerous players that can attack space. So if you're confident in those behind you to defend that space, then it becomes easier and you're more you're less averse.
And you look at the fullbacks. Last season they could really bomb on, and that was a real area of success for them. Whereas this,
I think it is. Look, it's all linked. I think to their injuries, and people will cite it as an excuse, but if you have but they didn't have any recognised centre backs on the pitch yesterday. They had two centre midfielders playing there. You're obviously going to miss Van Dijk, but even if they had Gomez and Matip playing and were able to play the two lads in centre midfield, and you just had two recognised players at the back, I do think it would make a difference.
But then is that an issue for not signing them? Because I look at that, I look at Matip, and I look at Gomez's injury record and go, they aren't perfect.
No,
Van
especially
Dijk's fine because he had an almost perfect injury record before.
Van Dijk, it's an ACL. They happen. You can't look at that and say he's injury prone or you could have predicted that. You can't, because that can happen to absolutely anyone at any moment. The Matip one, especially, Gomez is a bit similar in the sense he's kind of had some long-term injuries. I don't think he's prone to picking up kind of muscular injuries, for example.
It's just been like the here and there injury. Yeah.
Matip is a different story altogether. He's had back issues in the past. He's had muscular injuries. He's injury prone.
The year before he joined, he had spent an entire year out with an injury at Schalke.
Yeah, he's a very, very competent centre-back, Matip. He'd walk into most teams in the league. The problem is you just don't get enough out of him. If I think of his best spell at Liverpool, it was probably a six-month spell when they won the Champions League and Gomez was out of the team, and he came in and he stayed fit and he played really, really well.
And then he came back in the season after and started the season really well, and then got injured.
And then he got injured.
Yeah,
exactly. So when I look at it, I think you're right. It's a hard sell. Is the only other thing I would say, and it's a hard sell to say to anyone. We want you to come in. You're definitely going to be behind Van Dijk. You're probably going to be behind Gomez, and you're probably going to be at best on par with Matip.
But my counter argument to that would be, so if they made that argument to Jota to be, you're going to be behind Mane and Salah. Can you break into it? I think
it's different because you've got four people. I think there's two counters I would use to that. One is that it's three positions instead of two. The second is that if I look at that front three, you could sell it to Jota as you will succeed one of the people in this front three, and it will be kind of your position to make your own. Could you not
do that with the centre back? Because Van Dijk's 29 now. Matip's 29.
But Van Dijk's going to be there for another 3 or 4 seasons.
Do you think?
I'd be shocked. Yeah, I'd be shocked. I'd be absolutely shocked if he was, out of the team. Gomez is obviously going to be there long term as well. So I think it's slightly different with forwards, because also if you think of attacking trios, how long do they stay together for? 3 seasons?
2, 3
maybe
seasons.
4?
Yeah, true.
Because they were looking at it last night, and they were looking at Chelsea and Mourinho's first spell, so when they had, I think it was Drogba, Duff and Robben. They were looking at United under Fergie with Rooney, Tevez, Ronaldo. They were obviously looking at the Liverpool front three, and then they might have had one of the Manchester City front threes in there from their 2 league. The point is, none of them stayed together for more than 3 seasons. This is their 4th season, those 3. So you're kind of looking at it, you're looking at their age. I'm not suggesting any kind of physical decline here, but I do think with someone like Jota, you could say to him, look, we want you to come in. You're better than Origi, you're better than Minamino, you're better than Shaqiri. You are the man. If anyone picks up a long-term injury, and also you're the man that we want to use off the bench and to provide very, very stiff competition. And in fact, you'd argue that up until his injury, he'd sort of broken into the team. He was there.
Yeah, he was. People talk about him replacing Firmino. However, my last point on this would be, if you're Liverpool, you have Premier League minutes, you have Champions League minutes, you have League Cup, and you have FA Cup over a season. That's, in my head, that's enough to give 2,000 minutes to 4 centre backs.
It is.
So I think the idea of a settled 11, if your centre back doesn't have to be a divisive idea, you could get like a Koundé or probably maybe a Upamecano, but there are options.
Yeah, I'm looking at it as well. Liverpool are a club that they prioritise. They're sort of, they're not going to spend beyond their means. They're not like a Manchester City or a Chelsea. They don't make the revenues of a Man United. I know they've been successful in recent seasons, but they're still in a position where they need to prioritise certain positions. And I think we need someone to provide competition to the front three, because those behind them just aren't really at the levels. And if we get a long-term injury, you're going to be playing the likes of Shaqiri, Origi, Minamino for 30, 40 games. And
the African Cup of Nations as well. They weren't sure about that.
Yeah, and then the other thing is the centre midfield options. They needed a different kind of player. The Ox and Keita are injured quite a lot and not always effective. Fabinho, Henderson, Wijnaldum, they're more kind of industrious players than they are flair players. So they wanted to bring someone in like a Thiago. They've brought him in. Obviously, he's been injured, but I can also understand why they prioritised that position. And I think if you said to them, if you were going to pick another position where you'd want to sign a player, if the money was there, where would it be? And if you asked them that before the season, I think they would have said centre half.
Yeah, although the selling of Lovren is starting to look questionable to Zenit.
The selling of Lovren is starting to look questionable, but I think that's another one in terms of trying to make the money to prioritise other positions. It's exactly the same last season that they ended up probably going out the Champions League because they didn't have a better backup goalkeeper. It didn't cost them in the league; they got away with that. But a better goalkeeper, they win the tie against Atletico Madrid, and they maybe go on to win the Champions League. Who knows? But it did cost them last season, and you could argue it's a fact. It's costing them again.
Yeah. The issue with the goalkeeper thing, though, is that is probably the hardest sell in the world.
Of course it is. Of course it is. Alisson's the best keeper in the world for me at the moment. He's right up
top
there.
3 easy.
He's easily top, and he's by far and away the best in the Premier League. So,
I'd actually say one of the most underrated players in the world. I don't think he gets half the appreciation.
He's so good, and yet you might argue that people talk about Van Dijk a lot more than they talk about him. And maybe Van Dijk being out the side, you kind of notice him more. He's just so solid. I remember I said to you the other day, the reason maybe he doesn't get the praise all the time as well, he doesn't make the eye-catching saves like De Gea used to a few seasons ago. And I'm not saying De Gea by any means is a bad goalkeeper. They're just different. I think Alisson's positioning, his anticipation, his composure are so good. He's in such a good position to save any shot that comes his way that he just makes it look easy. He's very good with his hands, like his handling. Good with his hands, that helps if you're a keeper. But the saves don't need to look eye-catching because he's in the position to make them already. But you're right, it's a hard sell for a backup goalkeeper because that's what you are. You're there. You know, you might get a run like Emi Martinez did at the end of last season for us, or Alisson is prone to the odd injury, so you'll get your chances. But it's hard to sell it to anyone other than maybe a veteran or an up-and-coming goalkeeper.
Yeah.
No one in their prime is going to do it. No one in their prime because you're usually playing. No. So it's difficult. But I think on the balance of it, Liverpool would have wanted to win the game. They started on the front foot for about 30 minutes. Man United couldn't get a kick. And I always thought that if Man United got through that first half an hour, that's sort of where they were going to come at them. They would grow into the game and get more chances on the counter-attack, which kind of happened a bit towards the end of the first half. No chances really came a bit, but even them countering on Liverpool just sort of planted that seed of doubt in their mind. Can we commit as many bodies forward?
I remember Rashford getting it behind a couple of times.
Yeah, he was offside, but it only takes one. I remember when we played them, there was a couple of times where Lacazette went through on the goalkeeper, and you know, they're a much better counter-attacking side than we are. So you're sort of looking at it as, okay, we've started the game really well, but I don't know if we can keep playing at this intensity and with this amount of risk. The way the game panned out, I don't think Liverpool will be too unhappy with a point. They keep their home record. They keep a clean sheet, which I think with the personnel they had at the back and in midfield is really important for them. My question to you, and it was sort of put last night on Monday Night Football, would be, have Manchester United missed out or failed to capitalise?
I don't think.
Firstly,
go ahead.
And I'll let you answer. Firstly, in terms of who was on the pitch for Liverpool, so the centre backs, the personnel, and secondly, in terms of the way the game panned out, where they got through that initial half an hour spell. And it's really easy to do this in hindsight, but you have to, in the sense of, could they have earlier in the game smelt blood and capitalised? That's what I would ask you.
For the weird thing is to say to a team that's gone to Anfield and got a point, do you think you could have done more? It's a really hard sell.
It is a hard sell, and as an Arsenal fan that's watched their team go there 4 or 5 seasons and get absolutely battered, I can't imagine myself sitting here with you. Man United are ahead of us in their project, but I can't imagine myself sitting here with you and saying, "Oh my God, I cannot believe we didn't go for them."
Yeah, it's. I actually think
Man United have gone in such good form. Really good results behind them. Liverpool are a bit injury stricken. They're a bit sort of that, you know, their top players aren't quite hitting the heights that they have done in previous seasons. And yeah, you look at the way the game panned out. I don't know. I'm in a position of ambivalence. I don't know what I think, to be honest.
See, the issue is Bruno had a poor game.
He did.
So Bruno has a good game. I think they win that game. And for the entire 2020, he was having good games. So when I think about that Man United performance, and I think about, first of all, I thought Ollie was right to be in that first, because no matter what, you look at that lineup and think, for the first half an hour, we don't know how they're going to play. They've got Henderson at centre back, because you can't go out and predict that they're going to be a bit more conservative. You could maybe argue they're going to be the Liverpool of when Salah first came in and he got 30 goals.
I think he if you're Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, you're looking at it as Liverpool have had 9 days off. We've played an FA Cup tie. We've played Burnley. Now we've got Liverpool. So we played 2 games in between their last game. They're coming off a loss in the Premier League before that to Southampton. They're going to be up for this.
Yeah,
they are going to be up for this. There is no way they're not going to come.
And Klopp will get them up for it.
He will get them up for it. They're going to come for us in that first half an hour. That's the danger spell. If you get through that, you're in a really good position to go on and win the game, because the longer it's 0-0, they're not the Liverpool of the previous seasons at the moment. They're not, the confidence and the conviction's not quite there with them, in the sense that they believe they're going to win every single match and have a right to win every single match. And I think he would have been looking at it as, if we get through the first half an hour, get to half time, then get to 60 minutes, which is what they did, their best chances of the game came in that last quarter of the match.
Yeah, and you look at the way that Tottenham played. They were a bit more out there when it tried to be a bit more expansive, and inevitably they lost the game 2-1. So
they did.
So yeah. I mean that's ebb and flows, because they could have easily won that game if Kane was having a better day or Bergwijn slits it in. But I still think that I wouldn't have, if I was Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, that's the way I would have set up. I thought they were reliant on Shaw having a really good game, and he did, which helped a lot.
Excellent. He was, we should mention this because we talked about him on the last podcast, and I sort of said he's not quite my cup of tea as a fullback, because I like them to do a bit more in terms of attacking output. I just think that modern football, if I was to say to you, name me the best 5 left backs in the world at the moment, I think all 5 of them would be productive in the final third.
Yeah.
And I look at him at the moment, and I know you talk about his chance creation, and it's just a perception. And I'm happy to be proven wrong, but it's just when I watch him, if I'm playing Manchester United, I don't mind him getting the ball in those positions. Now, granted, in this game, he did probably create the best chance of the match for Bruno Fernandes when he cut it back to him. I thought it was, a really good pick out. And as you said, he's been doing it all season. One comment I thought was interesting on the commentary was, I can't remember if it was Gary Neville or Martin Tyler talking about how he looks like he's got his power back in his running. Because
his acceleration.
He had that really bad injury against PSV sort of all those seasons ago. Took a while to come back from that, and then you sort of look at him and you think, did he lose a bit from that? And it's understandable if he did, but he's sort of been staying fit, and he's a definite first choice at the moment. Like, you look at Tellez, some people will have said he's come in to be the first choice. He's not. He's in as cover or competition, and at the moment, there's one clear better fullback.
Yeah, and so I speak to some United fans about this, and they said when you watch him go for the ball or go for a tackle, feels like he's giving 8 out of 10, whereas so far this season it feels like he's giving 10 out of 10. And I wonder if it's that is him moving on and growing in confidence from that injury, which is fair enough, because he could have lost his leg.
It was an awful injury, awful injury, like one of the worst you'll see. So it's completely understandable that you might have some demons when sort of like maybe thinking about it. They're only human, right? These footballers, you expect them to sort of be superhuman, super athletes, but something like that, it's going to stick in your mind a little bit. And when I talk to United fans about Luke Shaw, he's a very kind of divisive figure. Some people think he's really good. Some people think he's really average to poor. But I don't think even the most sort of obtuse and biggest Luke Shaw critics could have looked at that performance on Sunday and said he was anything other than outstanding. Really,
yeah,
he had Mo Salah in his pocket.
I was about to say he's locked down one of the best right wings in the world for the last 5 years.
If you look at it over the last 2 seasons, Liverpool are probably the best team in Europe, right? Combined points, they've won a Champions League, they've won a Premier League at a canter, and Mo Salah has been their top scorer in both those seasons. And
throughout that, they've talked about how they've had for most of it they've had 2 men on Salah, so Mane and Firmino get more space, and he's still done it.
He did excellent. Yeah, I think he had a really good game. And I think Maguire had a really good game. And I'm a very big critic of Maguire. The only criticism, not criticism, but the only thing I'd say about the Man United defence is, if they want to go to that next level and get to the levels of a Liverpool and a Manchester City on a consistent basis every week, I do think they need to play higher up the pitch and close those gaps more. So if you look at the first 30 minutes in particular, where I can understand why they would be a bit wary, and I do understand it, because they aren't at that level yet of a Liverpool. They're not there. yet. They're in good form. They've gone there. They've got a good result. But until they, start hitting those levels consistently, you can't expect them to go there and be on that level and expect to win the game every time. When I look at their defending, they do concede space. They don't quite push up. They're not quite confident as a unit just yet. It might be that they need to bring someone in at centre back with a bit more pace to play next to one of those two. I think Maguire's probably slightly the better one because he's a bit better in the air, a bit more powerful. So he's the one that you would probably say, okay, it's him and one other. But I think it's difficult to criticise them. They've gone there, they've kept a clean sheet. They've, all of them have had at least a 7 out of 10 performance. But if you're a Man United fan and you're looking at that and thinking, how do we progress to the next level and get more consistency in our performances and dominate games? Because I think of this season, I think that they've won games in moments and moments of quality because they've got quality attacking.
I think they tried to do that again on Sunday.
Yeah, definitely. But that's understandable against Liverpool. I don't expect them to go to Anfield and dominate the games. Gary Neville said it last night. The best teams under Fergie didn't go to Anfield and dominate the games. You'd always have to stick in there and have your moments. They had their moments yesterday. They didn't quite take the chances. If they do, it's lauded as an Ole Gunnar Solskjaer masterclass. But I think if they want to dominate and control games more, have more periods of sustained pressure, then they need to be sort of narrowing the gap between the defence and the midfield and getting to players quicker, pressing with more intensity. And I think that just comes with playing with more confidence as a unit. I don't think it's one player in particular not doing their bit. I think it's just a little bit of kind of a resistance to maybe get exposed in behind or sort of on the turn, which is understandable because the two centre-backs aren't blessed with express pace when you look at them.
Yeah, and but to be fair, if you look at that Lindelof, Maguire, and then they have say it's McTominay and Fred in front of them. That four has been playing together for a year now.
Yeah.
So they are, and I think that's kind of seeing why you're seeing Man United performances grow is that this team is getting used to playing with each other. It hasn't. You could easily say the 11 that Man United would put out especially since lockdown and when they went on that great run.
He's found a system. So earlier in the season, it was one defensive midfielder. Sometimes it'd be Matic. I think on the first day of the season, it was McTominay. Against Spurs, it was Matic. Against Brighton, it was Matic. And then it was Pogba and Fernandes. So like a 4-3-3 and then Greenwood on the right. They've gone away from that now because they got hammered against Spurs. They were lucky not to get hammered at Brighton, and Palace gave them a pretty good dressing down on the opening day. And he's decided that he wants to play he's got 3 defensive midfielders there in Matic, McTominay and Fred. It's 2 of them every time. It's never one of them anymore unless, they're playing a really poor team or it's a cup game. I haven't seen him play one of them, I think, apart from possibly in the Champions League against Istanbul, I want to say, but
even still, he never does it. He's learned.
It's always been 2 of them, and it usually is those 2. Matic hasn't played as much. It's usually those 2, and there is a real benefit to, I think, and I've seen it with Arsenal recently, just having a settled lineup, knowing what team you're going to put out every week. You can make one change here and there, but by and large, it's the same core group of players. And what he's doing there, you've got an established back 4 and goalkeeper, and you've got 2 established midfielders. You've got Bruno that's always going to play. Rashford's probably always going to play. So you're only changing really 1 or 2 every game, if that. And I think that's a big part of why they're starting to pick up results.
Yeah, and I would like to say, I hope we can move on from the Ollie out stuff now, because I feel like he doesn't get as much time as any other manager in the league right now. Well, for the last 12 months at least. Like if he loses his next game, there'll still be the questions of, is he a good manager to take Man United to the league?
It's funny because he's never. I've definitely said this on another podcast. He's never bad enough to lose his job, because every time he's kind of on the brink, he puts together a run or he pulls it out of the fire. But he's never good enough. He never and this, that maybe this is where he does get to this level, but he's never quite been good enough to shake the tag of he's a PE teacher. It's really lucky he's been managing Man United. He's got no tactics, and I'll admit I'm not at that point yet either, but you can't question him at the moment because he's doing a good job. He's doing a good job with the players he's got. His man management looks to be good. I still think the one criticism I would level at them, if you look at the big games they've played this season, 1 goal against Tottenham, no goals against us, no goals against Chelsea, no goals against Man City, now no goals against Liverpool. Is it a tactical thing? Is it a mental thing where they're sort of a bit cagey in these games?
Maybe, yeah.
Whatever way you look at it at the moment, look, 4-0 draws isn't a bad thing. They've in these games, they're not getting beaten. Since Spurs, they've tightened up.
How many of them? Sorry, how many of them were away?
It's 3-0 draws. 3-0 draws, a 1-0 loss. They've played one away. So they played
Oh,
Liverpool
wow.
away, and then they played us at home, Tottenham at home, Chelsea at home, Man City at home.
That would be a
They're all
concern.
bad results. Man City at home and 0-0 is absolutely. That game might look to be the turning point. They've just been knocked out of the Champions League. You don't lose that game, and since then they've won all but 2 games, 2 draws away to Leicester and Liverpool, 2 of the top 3 or 4. So, you know, that's not a bad result in isolation.
And I'd also say with those Leicester and Liverpool games, they could have easily won them, which you couldn't have said earlier in the season.
It
was the other way around.
They could have, and if I look at it, I think that they're not bad results on the surface. The only thing I would say is I think they'll want more in those games. And they've got Arsenal in a couple of weeks. On paper, they should be coming and beating us. They're in better form. They've got better attacking players. But I would be very surprised if they came and thumped us. And look, I'm happy on this podcast to be proven wrong when we react to the game in a couple of weeks. But I'm just looking at it as the evidence wouldn't suggest they're going to do that. And of course it can change, and ultimately at some point it has to change. But that's the only maybe concern I would have with those games is because they're trying to win them in moments. If they don't take their chances at those moments and they're not controlling those games for large periods, they're not quite in the position where they're consistent enough just yet.
Yeah, I know, fair enough. And I think Man United, I think Ollie would actually say that. Moving on though.
I think he would. Yeah.
Arsenal v West Newcastle. Now this is it was 3-0 Arsenal.
It was.
But it was I'd like to talk about Newcastle and how last year their underlying numbers were horrific. They were Norwich bad. And they've come into this year and it feels like they just snag results. They snagged a result against Liverpool, get a draw. They rely on Callum Wilson and Ryan Fraser for a lot of their creativity going forward. And over time, and I'd say over the last 2 months, maybe a month, questions over Bruce have been around. Now, what direction do you think Newcastle are taking?
Okay, so they did a feature on this last night looking at Newcastle. So they were comparing Steve Bruce to Rafa Benitez. So looking at the kind of the last 4 seasons since they've been back up. Rafa was there for 2 seasons. Steve Bruce has been there for 2 seasons. Steve Bruce this season and last season had more points at this point than Rafa Benitez did in either of his 2 seasons. Last season, he picked up 44 points in total. I think Benitez's best tally was 45. The underlying numbers you talk about, so I can't remember the exact ones they put on there, was something about passes into the final third, possession.
Their XG, expected points.
XG would have been on there.
They're always terrible.
I don't know what their expected points is, but essentially they were comparing the two managers, and the output is worse under Steve Bruce, but it's not considerably worse. So what I would say to you is, on that, and we can talk about the general direction of Newcastle after this, because it kind of feeds into it. When I think of Newcastle, the football's been really poor for about 10 years now, if you think about it.
I do think it's been a percentage football.
They had 1 season, I think, under Pardew where they came 5th, and they were sort of quite close to the top 4. It was the year Chelsea won the Champions League.
But then their football, apparently, according to Newcastle fans, it was just give it to Papi Cisse and Demba Ba. And they'll just do something magical.
Even then, you might say the football wasn't good, but you can't argue with them finishing 5th because they would fucking bite your hand off for it now. Then they gave him a long-term contract. Wrong thing to do.
Yeah.
Football was poor for several years, and he gets sacked. They bring the interim bloke in. I can't remember who it was. I think it was John Carver, I want to say.
Yeah, but then they go to McLaren.
He was a clown. Then they go to Steve McLaren. The football under McLaren was rubbish, and they end up getting relegated that season. Rafa comes in.
Rafa was there for the end of the McLaren season.
The end of the McLaren season, they go down, and then he brings them back up the next year. I think there's a couple of reasons why they're really loyal towards Rafa, and I do understand it. One is his CV. It's kind of earned him that trust and support with the supporters. because he's got a track record of doing it. He's won a Champions League with Liverpool and got them into the top 4. He was a good manager at Valencia. He's managed Real Madrid. Like, he's got a track record.
It feels like Rafa's doing Newcastle a favour when he manages them.
It does. And the second thing I was going to say is he displayed loyalty in when they got relegated. He stuck it out and brought them back up at the first attempt. So I do understand the affinity that the Newcastle fans have for Benitez, because I think I would be the same. The problem is the performances under him and the way he was setting them up, and you could definitely make the argument, and I do think it stems from this, that the financial backing wasn't there for him to get the players he wanted, for them to play more expansively and dominate games of football against anyone. So he was working with what he had, essentially, and that ultimately is why he left his position in the end, because on transfer strategy, he just felt he had no say. He was being presented these players. Yep, we're signing Joel Linton from Hoffenheim for 40 million. Well, I don't want him. Tough. We're signing him.
He also got a lot. He got Longstaff playing. He got both the Longstaff playing. So they can see that.
The only thing I would say, the performances under him weren't good. They weren't a good team to watch. I don't think any Newcastle fan would tell you that the football under Benitez was good, and they'll make a good case for why it wasn't good and why it's not his fault, and I completely understand that. The direction of Newcastle is really concerning. It's really, really concerning, because if you look at it, they're trending down. Their form is probably the worst in the league, bar none. And someone like Fulham, for example, looked to be on the up. They looked like they did some good business at the end of the window. And the football they're playing and the performances they're putting together are so much better.
If you look at the teams below them, it's Brighton who can do more. Burnley have hit resurgence.
Yeah.
Fulham have got a game in hand, look really good. And even West Brom. No.
That's right. But West Brom are a bit similar, but West Brom are in the relegation zone. The reason I compare Newcastle to these teams is they've got the points on the board by now. You know, if you think that, whether you think they deserve them or not is a different story, and I agree with you in terms of the performances and the underlying numbers. Last season and this season are really, really, really poor, and they're really great. And I watched them against us. I don't think they're deliberately doing it. They just don't look very good players. They played a 4-2-4 last night, and their XG was 0.2. They created absolutely nothing. And we're not exactly watertight. I know we've been keeping clean sheets, but you can get out our defence, and they really did nothing. And it wasn't, I don't think Steve Bruce is a great coach. I'll be honest, I don't think he is at the level they need. And you could put it down to coaching that they're not creating stuff, but I think the players are really poor. Like, they brought in Joe Linton and Almiron for pretty big transfer fees.
A combined 65 million, I'd say.
That's it, yeah, 40 million, 25. And they just look awful. Andy Carroll looks past it. I think the only person that looks at the level for a club like that is Callum Wilson. And that's the only thing you could say. You could say he is a much better striker than anything that Benitez had to work with when he was there, when he had Dwight, Gale and Rondon.
Yeah.
The midfielders are average. The defence is average. It's just...
I think
they're a really, really average team.
I think if you were to ask a Newcastle fan about the difference between the Rafa performances and the performances right now, is under Rafa they still felt hard to beat. It felt like they
were a better team defensively. They don't feel to me like a good team defensively. Last night we opened the scoring on the break.
Yeah.
And if you're a team that's trying to come and be solid, you can't be getting caught on a counter attack from a corner. Which is
I think that's what Newcastle want to be. They want to be the team right now that just takes points off the bigger team. They liked it when they took points on Man City. They liked it.
Yeah.
Whereas now they're just a bit like was relying on Darley.
The only thing I would say is that they did get pelters under Benitez when I was reading an article from Alan Shearer on The Athletic about it. Obviously, kind of no better person to comment on. Obviously, he's played for the club, he's managed the club, Newcastle born and bred. He's a fan as much as anything, and he was talking about the fact that the biggest problem is there's just no hope. All they want is hope. I don't think they expect to be winning trophies. They haven't won trophies for 50, 60 years. But there's just kind of... It's every game, it's accepting that you're going to barely have the ball, you're going to create very few chances. If you do create them, you have to take them, or the best you're going to take from the game is a draw. And...
all the money you make is going to go in it.
All the money you make is going to go into the owner's pocket.
Yeah,
I think this ownership dispute at the moment is just...
I think that's the issue. I think
it's a real cloud hanging over the club.
There's nothing like Newcastle aren't waiting for a next generation of talent. They're not waiting for opportunities become available. They're just sitting around waiting for a takeover.
It feels rudderless. It feels rudderless.
Yeah.
It's kind of, when you ask me what do I see for the future for Newcastle, I don't know. If I was a Newcastle fan, I'd be worried because I wouldn't know how to
staying in the Prem at best.
Situation do they just want to be a team that finishes 16th, 15th every year at best and kind of hangs around and they're just there and the football's really poor, but they're not the worst team in the league. They're just average. I don't think that is going to satisfy their fan base at all, and actually nor should it. They should be up there with the likes of Everton, the likes of Aston Villa. You look at someone like Southampton at the moment, West Ham, like they're bigger clubs than all of those.
Yeah,
or Everton maybe, but they're bigger clubs than the other guys.
They just made really bad decisions.
So I completely understand any anger, frustration, resentment towards the situation at the moment. I think it's a really complex situation, and it's difficult to see it getting resolved at the moment. I think it does honestly have to come from a change of ownership, but when that's going to come, it's not immediately obvious.
Yeah, and for Arsenal, Aubameyang's back and Smith Rowe's really good.
Yeah, I thought it was a good second half from Arsenal. I think we accepted we were going to have a lot of the ball. I think that the positives, as I mentioned, we're kind of they said it afterwards. They said, and I agreed with this, we're getting to see a team and a group of players on the pitch that you actually like.
Yeah.
The problem is, all season there's been players playing that you just look at an hour before the game and you just go, oh my God, why is he playing again?
Why is Willian playing again?
You can already see it going a certain way, but now you've got the likes of Saka, the likes of Martinelli, the likes of Smith Rowe, the likes of Partey back in midfield,
Rob Holding,
left back. I like Rob Holding.
Yeah.
I think he's been playing really well and he should get a mention. And I think he deserves the contract he's been given, and hopefully he can go on and be a really good player for us. But if I'm looking at it, I'm starting to like the core of the team that we're building. The problem I think we're going to have, and we've seen this, is that the rotation options and the guys that come in if there are injuries or you've got games in quick succession, the performance dip. I mean, Tierney didn't play the other night against Palace. The performance was so poor, and that's one player. That's one of our key players out of the team, and it's so poor. You take Thomas Partey out the midfield, the drop-off is absolutely
Take Smith Rowe out, to be fair.
You take Smith Rowe out the number 10 role, who plays there?
Yeah.
So, I'm really pleased that we're getting results. I'm really pleased that from the last 5 games, we've taken 13 points. We've kept 4 clean sheets in a row in the league, 5 in all competitions. And I'm glad that going into a tough run of games that we've got upcoming, we've got at least some form going into them. I think the problem we've had all season is we've not been able to get any momentum at any point. So when we go into these hard games, there's so much pressure on them, and you've kind of got no reason to think you're going to win them. Whereas now, because we've been keeping clean sheets, because there's kind of a breath of fresh air in the team, and we've been getting results, there's more confidence around the place. So, you don't want to get too carried away. Newcastle aren't a great side, neither are West Brom, neither are, Palace and Brighton. But you have to win the games, and the narrative could have been completely different coming out of those 5 games if we'd picked up something like half the points we have, or even less than that.
Or you just didn't play Smith Rowe and Martinelli.
It's funny how you stumble across something, isn't it? A few injuries, a few COVID issues, and suddenly you've got your template.
It's like we called for it about really 4 months ago.
Looking a lot more positive for Arsenal.
Yeah, so maybe Arteta listened to us when we said, play the kids, but
however he's come across it, it's working.
Yes, it's fine. You're out there, Arteta. We know it. Anyway,
no ball.
My question is, and this is a weird one. Who's there for the title now? It's in my head. It's still City. But
so what? Like who's favourites, or who's in it, or
who's in it?
Kind of.
Who's in it? Who's your 5 names in it?
The 5 names.
Yeah.
So I'll try and list these off in sort of likelihood order. So I think City at the moment because of the fixtures they've had as well. I think I said this. They've kind of gone under the radar a little bit. The defence looks really good. They've got by far the best defensive record in the league, and they've had a few Saturday 3 o'clocks against Burnley and Fulham, and they played Newcastle on Boxing Day. They've just been getting these routine wins at home that there's no real fuss made about them. I think the game where people really sat up and took notice of City for the first time this season domestically was the win at Chelsea. where they suddenly, it was like sort of switch went off, and for 30 minutes in that first half, between minute 15 and 45, they were breathtaking, and they were at the levels that they had been in the previous two campaigns to the last one, where they picked up 100 points and 98 points. They look at the moment the front runners because they're keeping clean sheets. I still don't think the attacking players, it's not quite where it was. They were, they huffed and puffed a bit against Brighton the other night. They were good against Palace, obviously.
They're relying on Foden a lot.
I think Foden looks excellent. I think he's probably the only talent as an Arsenal fan. I look at the young talent in the league, and I look at someone like Bukayo Saka. The only person I think that's been better than him this season and looks maybe slightly ahead in his development is someone like Foden. He just looks excellent.
Yeah.
And you can see why Guardiola, when asked about him last season, was talking about how he's just a complete sell at absolutely no price. There's no price you could put on him. So he's been really good. He's their top scorer this season, I think. Or he certainly was going into the last game. So they're there for me. I think second, you have to have Liverpool, just because they are the top goal scorers in the division, even with the recent troubles they've been having. We know the levels they can hit. They're not at those levels at the moment, but it can only take 1 or 2 games, and suddenly they click back into a rhythm, and the front three start firing, and they might get 1 or 2 of their centre backs back. You just don't know. They're there for me. If things go right for them, they're still an excellent team. Third, I would mention, is probably Man United at the moment. I still think we're going to see a dip, but I think that they will be there in the top 4 at the end of the season, because I think they've still got quality in their squad. When you look at them now compared to this time last season, what's most impressive for me is their options off the bench as well. I think if you look at the starting 11 that they played on Sunday, it's pretty similar to what it was at the end of last season in terms of the personnel they've got available. And they might have made 1 or 2 changes here and there, but no one that was in that team wasn't at the club last season. But what they've done in the summer, and their business was ridiculed a little bit, but they've got depth on the bench now. So they've got the likes of Van der Beek, Cavani they can bring off the bench. If they don't play one of the centre midfielders, they can bring Pogba off the bench. They can rotate Fernandes if they want to. If they don't play Martial, they can bring him off the bench. Likes of Juan Mata is a good player in some situations. Like, they've got options, and I think that puts them there at the moment. I don't think they're at the levels of those two, but I think they're in the conversation, which is what we said.
They're going to need a bit of luck. They're going to need a bit of luck.
I said to you, didn't I? They would need the points tally, which doesn't look like it's going to. That points tally can't go above something like 85 points. Yeah. They're not at that level, I don't think. Fourth.
Here's a question for you. Who's getting fourth in the league then?
Well, I think it's Leicester at the moment. I think they're playing better football than Tottenham. It's Leicester or Tottenham. They're the 5 teams. I hate saying Tottenham.
If Everton win their game in hand, they go above Liverpool.
Okay, do you think Everton have been playing well?
No, but I think they've got. How long do you sell out for?
Not sure, but I just think they've been grinding out results. I don't mean this in a sort of like I don't mean to appear salty about it at all, but Everton against us were really poor, and it said more about us that we lost the game. But it was a really average performance. They scored from a corner and
they were poor against Fulham. Actually, yeah, they were poor against United.
Pretty average against Fulham. They would it was workmanlike at Sheffield United. I didn't see them against Wolves, but it's another win by 1 goal.
Yeah,
I'm not. If you want me to be honest, I'm not blown away by them. I think Dominic Calvert-Lewin's a really good player. James is a very good technical player.
I like the Richarlison.
Dangerous, but then the defense is average. The goalkeeper's poor. The midfield, not convinced. So, they could get top 6, but I don't think they're in that. They're definitely not in the title discussion for me.
Oh God, no. Yeah.
And I don't think they're a top 4 outfit. I don't think they're as good as a Leicester, even a Tottenham.
I can actually see Chelsea finishing higher than Tottenham.
I'll throw this out there. I think we could finish above them. I don't think we're on our day. If we get into form, I don't think we're much worse than them. And I'm happy to revisit this at the end of the season. But I think that the players they've got, where did they finish last season? It would have been
mid-table. Yeah.
Are they really that much better than that now?
Maybe a Villa. Although it matters how these fixtures come, because they've got 4 games.
Then I was saying this earlier on Villa. I'm definitely going to get abused by some Everton fan after this.
What do you bloody mean there, mate? Oh, that's bumming.
I think Villa, any injuries and they're bang in trouble, because I think if you look at their
the bench is shocking.
if Grealish picks up a long-term injury, if Watkins gets
If
injured, I know he
Concert
hasn't been
or
scoring. If that's right, if Concert picks up an injury, the goalkeeper picks up an injury.
Yeah.
These things, you know,
If
could argue that a lot
Mac...
of the top clubs, Liverpool have had to do without their best centre backs, Arsenal have had to do without their 50 million, 45 million pound signing. If something akin to that happened to Villa, I know Barkley's been out injured a little bit, which has been a blow to them. But
if it's not Mike Cash, I think it's Hammer Hamady.
Yeah. So I just think that if they have a few injuries, they're struggling a little bit for depth. But at the moment, they're playing good football and they're getting good results. So you can't argue with it. I think they're definitely a top half team, as a Southampton, and maybe West Ham. So I've just made the case for Arsenal to get the top half, but
it's tight. It's exciting. It's been a great year so far. So
yeah, it's been a very interesting league because if you win something like 3 or 4 games in a row, or you lose 3 or 4 games in a row, you could move something like 5-6 positions in the table.
Yeah, and my last question, as an excitement, who's going to be top goal scorer? So there's currently Salah on 13, Son on 12.
Who is it at the moment?
Harry Kane on 12, Vardy on 11, Bruno on 11, Dominic Calvert-Lewin on 11, and then Bamford 10, Wilson 8. I think Vardy. Because I think everything goes through him.
Yeah, it does. He gets a lot of the goals. Although Harvey Barnes has added goals to his game for Leicester.
True.
Maddison's chipping in, so it's a positive for them. Who do I think? I think... I can't say Kane. I definitely can't say Kane. I'll go Salah just to be contrarian.
Nice. So, Vardy has the highest XG of any player this year. That's mad.
Yeah, how many penalties has he had though?
Doesn't matter.
It's something like 7 or 8 they've had this season.
Is it? Oh, fuck.
Yeah, at least.
But anyway, thank you for listening to Just Another Football Pod. Our predictions are still from the last one, so if you want to go and listen to that, then they'll all be there. And we'll listen to you next time.